Meeting of the NFP Review Board for April 27th, 2021, held virtually pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.263 and MCL.263A1B. I think I got all that. And yeah, Jamie, could we start off with a roll call?
Yes, I have just a few items to add before I do roll call. If board members, as much as possible, if you could keep your video on. When your video is on, you are part of our live stream. So folks who are watching on YouTube and Facebook can see you and hear your votes and comments. If you have to, you can go off of video briefly. I understand there's just things that pop up. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm going to forward to the board after this meeting a virtual meetings tip sheet that comes from Disability Network. And one of the norms we're starting to practice here at the city and it helps with minute taking and all sorts of things. If you could, before you make a comment, just, let people know, hey, this is Jamie, so that they can kind of make sure that they're knowing who's speaking. That'll help a lot. Folks on the phone, there's all sorts of benefits to, if we can kind of get in that practice, that would really help. And then I'll send the tip sheet out, kind of talks more about that. And then lastly, I'd like to mention for folks who are watching, if you want to make a comment, we have two opportunities on the agenda today to make a comment. If you want to make a general comment, you can select that option when you call the call-in number to leave a message. And so that call-in number is 269-226-6573. You will also be given the option to make a comment about item number 1 on the agenda, which is related to a variance request for the property at 3110 Oakland Drive. So again, that number is 269-226-6573. And with that, I will start the roll call. Director Colwick.
Present.
And one more reminder too, if you will state that you're present and what location you're currently in, city and state.
Of course. Present, and I am in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Thank you. Fuller.
Present in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Glasser.
Here in Kalamazoo.
Leto.
Present, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
McNellis.
Present, Mattawan, Michigan.
And then Director Martin and Director Sylvester both have excused absences because of prior work commitment that they couldn't change.
Okay, can we entertain a motion to excuse absent board members?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, so the agenda as written, can I also entertain a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Support from Paul. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then looking back at our meeting minutes from March 23rd, can I entertain a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Support from Aaron. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda are any citizen comments. Do we have any of those today?
No citizens' comments currently.
Okay, easy enough. Next item on the agenda is new business, item F, the public hearing for a variance request for relief from NFP slope protection standard and tree protection standard at 3110 Oakland Drive.
So we're going to have a presentation, or at least some background information provided by Tammy, who's joining us from Bosch. And she's going to be able to tell us about the site and about the future redevelopment of the property and the request that they have in front of the board tonight, which is looking at a variance for 2 different items. And then once Tammy gets to explain the project and the request to you, we'll circle back and I can give you some of the staff input and recommendation that was included in the memo in your packet. Then we will allow you all to listen to public comments that may have been left about the project. And then it'll go back to the board for your discussion. And then we'll go on to that closes the hearing. And then we can go on to voting on the item. So if you, Tammy, want to get started, did you want me to share my screen with anything in particular? Sorry, Tammy, you're on mute. Do you want me to unmute you?
There we go. Yeah, if you can pull up sheet C001.
Give me just a moment. I'm also having Nolan Bergstrom from the city join us to talk about our second item. So he should be joining us here.
That's the, that's the landscape plan.
Yep, let me just get this queued up here. C001.
Yes, that's correct. That's the site development plan.
Excellent. I've got it right here.
Oh,
You guys should all be able to see my screen.
Okay.
You'll give me just a moment to try to increase this. I know my computer's a little slow with such a large file, so.
And that's
While
correct.
you're working on that, Jamie, Paul, do you have something in front of your microphone? You sound a little muffled. On your computer or something, maybe?
No, actually, how's this? Mimi, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta.
Maybe it's my audio. You're coming through. It's just a little more muffled than normal.
Okay, well, that's probably not bad. So,
We'll survive. Okay, sorry.
yeah, okay.
Okay, so
Great.
what,
So Tammy, you can get started and let me know when you need me to change it. I have all of the sheets that were submitted here in the packet so I can scroll down.
okay. And what we're here to discuss mainly is that northwest portion of the site where we're encroaching on that natural area that Jamie is kind of pointing to right now. Two areas being the dumpster enclosure, and that will encroach on the slope setback that has been set in place to protect the existing slope heading down to Woods Lake. That is part of that is happening within an area that's already paved. So we're not asking for a forgiveness on that whole area. We're adding maybe 2/3 of that into or on top of what's already there, which we're going to demolish. But we are repaving in that site. And then the second variance that we're going for is the critical root zone setback on the maple that Jamie is circling right now, in order to put that parking lot in. The struggle was meeting parking requirements that are required by the city based upon occupancy for all of these spaces. And then also, obviously, we have to provide the infrastructure, meaning the dumpster enclosure itself. As far as the existing tree goes, the existing paving currently exists within about 1.5 feet of that tree trunk. So actually what we're proposing should, and I can't guarantee that, but should improve the overall health of that tree long-term. So in addition, we think that that's a good thing moving forward. So those are primarily what we're addressing today. Everything else is well within the setbacks and the requirements. So those are the only two items that we're asking for with the variance.
I will add that you see in this drawing right now, this patio that encroaches into some of these setbacks. And the idea here from the consultant was that this could be reconfigured or reconsidered because it's sort of an accessory to what they're hoping would be a tenant here that would be a restaurant who could use this space. But that it's not a requirement like locating a dumpster and providing minimum parking. So this would be reconfigured in the future. And the only encroachment would be, again, the dumpster and the critical root zone here that we pointed out. Tammy, do you want to talk big picture about what's being redeveloped at this site and how you're kind of reusing the foundation of this building because of how close it is to the adjacent property?
Absolutely. The building located in the southeast corner, that is primarily going to be a consumer's credit union location. There will be some tenant space both on the main floor and on the second level. The building located along the north property line is being constructed on a portion of the existing Bacchus foundation. That's to obviously allow us to build that close to the property line without being subject to updated setbacks. And it does minimize the disturbance to the site. And the idea behind that development is that'd be a multi-tenant use, and we don't know what the use is at this point, but we're hoping some restaurants, perhaps office, retail space. So trying to leave that flexible and still allow some outdoor space that might be attractive to a cafe or a coffee shop or something along those lines.
And so the request in front of you today is to consider and make a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals for this variance. It's two-dimensional variances, one allowance to encroach into the slope setback area. So the slope kind of starts back here behind the new proposed dumpster enclosure. But this is that setback area that is required at the top of the slope. This slope then goes down to it's Woods Lake. There, it may actually go on to, I was trying to think about the property line here. There's a city park back here, but then there's also a park and property that's owned by the landowner to the west, which is the Oakland or the Oakwood Neighborhood Association. So they have some public access for the neighborhood here to Woods Lake. And so the idea is, and you'll consider, you can consider a recommendation right now, the way the agenda is written, it's recommending both of these, but the board can have that conversation. You might want to change your motion if you feel like you want to separate these out for approval, and that's acceptable. And so the idea is this project was kind of moving forward through site plan review. And because they needed the variances here, the dumpster and then encroachment again into that critical root zone, there's not supposed to be any construction in or paving at a critical root zone. If you grant these two recommendations to the ZBA, this project then would go to the Zoning Board of Appeals at the beginning of May. And that board would then take your recommendation, review the case, and decide to approve the variance or not. And then the project at that point, through the city, we require any zoning variances, any zoning considerations be taken up first. And then that allows the project to have a viable site plan that would go forward to site plan review. For NFP purposes, that means that this whole site plan would come back to you for the full review, right? You'd review it for landscaping plans, all of the different standards in the NFP standards right now. But again, that would be another visit back probably next month, perhaps the following month. But right now we're really just looking at a recommendation for encroachment into those two areas. I'm going to stop sharing my screen a minute here so you guys can see one another. I guess right now we can open it up to any questions you might have for Tammy, and then we'll go on to public comments too, so you can hear those before you move on to any business. Mitch, if you want to call on folks.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Tammy, excuse me. Is there gonna be a curb and gutter along there? The stormwater right now is running off of the lot and down that slope.
Right.
Is there any, do you guys plan on redirecting that or keeping that the same?
No, there will be curb and gutter all along the exterior of that parking lot, with the exception of where the truck would enter onto that dumpster enclosure pad. So that would be the only point that would be flush with the asphalt paving.
Okay. Interesting. Good. That's good. Thank you.
I have a few questions for the applicant. The first one is a pretty simple one. The kind of northeast corner of the site development plan you showed, where there's the dotted line, and then it shows an existing building. That building is I think it's a jeweler. That's a completely separate property. That's not part of the redevelopment plan. That's a totally separate parcel.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And then my second question was, could you talk a little bit about, in the southeast corner, there's kind of a flagpole and a circular feature there. Could you talk about what the intent for that space is?
Yep, and that is kind of in conjunction with the city of Kalamazoo. And what that's going to be is more of a pedestrian plaza space used as an entry feature, a hangout space, that kind of thing. So it will beautify that corner and not, I guess, clutter up with buildings.
Okay. And then my last question, I guess, at the moment is, what alternatives did you consider in terms of trying to meet the slope and the tree protection requirements in terms of parking spaces or dumpster locations?
Yeah, if we were to meet what is required by the city for parking, those are really our only options as far as layout. Obviously, the site's pretty tight. So the trade-off being, if we move that dumpster enclosure out of that slope setback line, we lose parking spaces. So it was one of those balancing acts of trying to meet all requirements with minimal site disturbance.
I have
Okay.
maybe a couple of items that might be of interest to the NFP review board. For just a little bit of background, I believe there's a utility easement issue in this corner as well that prohibits the construction of buildings at the corner. And so that was sort of why some of those conversations took place quite a while back, where this kind of has to be used a little differently and not used for a building right at the corner. So we can't really shift the building over to try to maybe gain parking. I think there's too many easement issues, and even like air rights, maybe with some of the lines that are there. And then I did ask our assistant city planner, who does a lot of zoning administration, about alternatives that he might see for a location for the dumpster. And he said, kind of similar to what Tammy just said, because our ordinance right now does not allow a dumpster to be in the front or side yard. And of course, this gets always tricky with these corner parcels, right? It kind of has two side yards. The dumpster would have to probably be located somewhere in the middle of the parking lot. And then, of course, that's a direct trade-off with parking spots. We had also, he and I had thought about, could the dumpster somehow back here, but then with drive-through use for the bank and again parking spots, it didn't feel like it was going to be accessible to a truck, and the slope setback just really hugs the pavement here.
Jamie, does so with that, I guess just thinking about those alternatives, that southeast corner there where there's the circular pedestrian feature, so you said that would be limited because of the utility on any building footprints, but would it be limited in terms of parking? I mean, does that conflict with the utility?
I could try to get that answer for you. I would imagine that it's keeping people, buildings, and cars clear of those lines, but I would like to confirm that. Again, I think the city had a strong preference to making this a real public space instead of, we don't allow parking lots. Typically, it's not good practice to have those right at the corner. And so I don't think that would be probably a very good use of space for parking. And
it's
I'm not
really-
sure, how you'd get in and out of it with parking, if it would really add many spaces. It looks like it'd more just be like a driving lane.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add. I don't think we have enough space even to get into a parking area. I'm not sure that the amount of paving that we would have to add would amount to really a net gain of any parking.
And then,
Good question.
go ahead, Erin.
I was just going to say, I had a question about the parking spaces. So you had said that there were 37 or 37 required spaces according to city ordinance. But according to the NFP ordinance, relief can be offered to meet the standards of the NFP. So relief on setbacks and parking standards. Is that a possibility?
Tammy, I don't know if you guys considered instead requesting a variance to reduce parking. I will say that parking has been a neighborhood issue for quite a while, that there's limited parking at the Oakland Plaza across the street, and that the city has tried to provide some relief by opening up parking across the street at the city park, because the parking has been so problematic or limited during certain times. So I guess I would just throw that out there. I do know that parking is a concern for the neighborhood. We can see if we get any comments about parking from the neighborhood. But I guess back to Tammy, have you guys thought about reducing, instead of the NFP variance, if you would consider a parking variance?
That I can't speak to. I've kind of jumped on this project within the last 6 weeks or so. I'm fairly new. And I know this has been going on for quite some number of years. I would imagine that has been considered, but I know that the owner of this site was concerned about the number of parking spaces, because a lot of times what is allowed in the zoning doesn't end up being quite enough for really what the use is. So that's as much as I can speak to on that issue.
And then one other, just thinking about alternative ideas, that south. So the dumpsters are typically in some kind of enclosure, like some kind of wood slat fence or something like that. That southwest corner there, I mean, it would be tight. Certainly the location now is tight. That's kind of the question that we're all scratching our heads on. But the southwest corner, if that was enclosed there, so it wasn't like an aesthetic, as much of an aesthetic issue. I assume that's why the dumpsters are usually in back, so people don't have to look at them. But if that's enclosed, I mean, it looks to be pretty close to the size of that. It's not exactly, it's a little bit square peg round hole, but.
Right. I think the issue with doing that is, first of all, it is in the front yard and it will be enclosed. Yes, definitely. It's with a masonry dumpster enclosure. So you're not really going to be seeing the actual dumpsters themselves. It will be an attractive enclosure. I think the problem with doing that is going to be truck access to that site, because those trucks have quite a large turning radius and have to access the enclosure head in. So access would be a real issue there.
Yeah, and that would be, so what I'm hearing is that would be like an alternate, if it were feasible, it would be an alternate variance request, because again, per our ordinance, you're not allowed to put, you need to have an enclosure regardless, and you're not allowed to put that in a front or side yard like you would over here.
Tammy, I have a question too. What is that one-way loop for?
The one-way loop is a ATM access drive-through lane.
Okay, okay.
I have one more comment that's just, it's a little premature, I think, because it sounds like you'll be coming back for landscaping things, but probably better you think about it now than in a month, is that we do require all native species, and right now the planting plan is not not all native species.
Right, and we weren't, I guess we were going on the impression that just the actual area that was within that NFP zone had to be natives. But Jamie has let us know that the entire site is now subject to those requirements. So yes, we are aware of that, and that will have to be addressed.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I guess maybe this is just a board discussion item, or maybe a question for Jamie too. I guess just overall, I'm echoing a little bit of Aaron's thoughts as to there's a couple of, I'm really happy to see this space redeveloped. I'm familiar with it and it's been vacant for a long time. So I think this would be great for the neighborhood. And, the NFP requirements are coming up against zoning requirements and other city requirements. And I guess I'm just kind of thinking out loud a little bit as to, obviously one has to give to fit the development within the site or just make things work. And I'm wondering why the slope, why the NFP has to be the one that sort of compromises.
Well, Mitch, I have a
and-
comment kind of related to that, if you don't
Mhm.
mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is, I'm also live not too far from this area and, walk and drive in that area a lot. And it just seems like you're asking a lot for this small parcel that is adjacent to a very put upon natural area in our city that's already really suffering from the runoff and slope issues from the surrounding neighborhood. And when I heard that this was going to be redeveloped as a bank, I thought, well, that's maybe okay because, you won't need so much parking space if you're going to be a bank and a lot of your visitors. And to hear also, right on this busy road that's not very safe for pedestrians to cross Oakland right there either direction, that, and it's loud, that you're thinking of the cafe and other things. And I just think, I don't know how I feel about a variance on that slope for an area that's already so heavily developed around there, for one of the very few natural areas in that, in that neighborhood. And I just think it's a lot of activity for a very small parcel of land on an already very dangerous and busy intersection, especially for pedestrians and cyclists. I've witnessed several near accidents by both pedestrian cyclists, and and so I just think it seems like there's a lot that you're trying to do with such a small piece of land, and then and then adding a high volume. If you're thinking banks and cafes, that's a lot of people going in and out and pulling out in that dangerous intersection, and it seems like what Mitch was getting at. Either we have to have a variance for the city or the NFP ordinance. And I just wonder why, and I'm not saying I haven't made a decision or anything yet, but I'm just thinking out loud and having the discussion that it's just a very small plot of land next to a very steep slope and one of the few water features in that area,
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are really, just in terms of the space overall, it's one thing to look at it on the map, but to stand out there and kind of know that space, I think those are really good observations. And I think kind of piggybacking on what Ashley was saying, and Jamie, maybe you can speak to this too, because it sounds like there's been quite a bit of consulting with the city as far as the design and how things are laid out. Thinking about, I go to the restaurants in this neighborhood and I live just down the street. I'm thinking about if I was visiting this space and I was a customer or tenant or whatever, it seems like the pedestrian focus with the benches and that circular feature and the access and all of that is on the corner of the intersection. And the site is pretty much almost all hardscaped as it is. And I'm thinking that maybe it would require some, I realize that it's not just, you can't just put parking spots wherever, it's got to be a flow. But I'm wondering about kind of flipping the perspective on that a little bit. So you talked about a restaurant kind of potentially near that slope And, the dumpster essentially is going in the natural area. And I think about that as kind of maybe wasted space if the benches and the public access or sort of pedestrian features are more associated with that wooded slope in the lake. That seems to be more of a natural fit. And I'm a little biased because I like spending time in the woods, but I feel like I would rather sit on a bench near a wooded slope than the corner of Oakland and Parkview. And so I realized it's not that easy to just move parking spots around in terms of the site plan. But I don't know. I think it's just a little more judicious to use the already impacted impervious space and to really take advantage of the natural area in the corner. So that's kind of where my mind is going. And then, considering all the different requirements that are trying to be met in a small space, like Ashley was pointing out.
So I'm hearing some discussion around the dumpster enclosure. Are there any thoughts or questions about the critical root zone of the maple tree, that 42-inch species
Yeah.
here?
You got a thought, Paul? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Jamie, I sent them late, but I took a couple of pictures there this morning, or yesterday, this morning. I don't know. Anyway, did you get those? Can you put those up on the screen? Is that possible? Anyway, well,
Give me 1
Jamie's
second,
working
yeah.
on that. We had this presented to us about 1.5 years ago, if I remember right. It was on a list of several places, but I went over there at that time and took some pictures and didn't walk that slope because it's very steep. But my opinion then is pretty much like it is now. What is going on there is a positive, I think, for the, oh yeah, there it is. There's 2 silver maples there on the corner. Yeah, the runoff from the parking lot comes right in front of me and goes down. That's why I was kind of pleased about them putting curb and gutter up there to keep that runoff from going downhill. You see the roots that are exposed right now to right to that silver maple, right? It's a clump silver maple right there. That's very typical of a lot of the trees down slope. So what they're doing with the stormwater pleases me, that they're not going to do that, or they're going to stop that from happening. This is all fill in here. Jamie, you have the other picture? It shows from the other direction. Yeah, concrete blocks, bricks. There's even some asphalt paving that was dumped down the hill there. And the tree on the left here, that's a silver maple also, and you can see she's been rode hard and put away wet. I mean, that poor horse is about dead. So as far as saving those trees, the root zone, my personal opinion is take them the hell out if you need to. But I would like to see some stabilization going on down further on the bank. There are some decent trees down the bank that their roots are exposed or are being exposed. As far as a variance for these 2 big guys, I can't say no.
I agree with
I
Paul.
mean, in fact, I am going to make the motion when it comes that we approve this. Okay, my thoughts.
Yeah. I agree. There has to be some better options to stabilize that slope and do it intentionally and let that silver maple out to pasture.
Do you guys want to hear public comments and hear what folks have to say about this? And then we can start the conversation right back up again. And I apologize, I'm not being very good with my announcing myself, but this is Jamie. And Don, I'm wondering if you would be willing to play us any public comments.
Okay, we don't have any public comments that came through on this item. I just wanted to make you aware of a couple that happened to show up for the general section on item 1, but none on this one in particular.
Chair Leto, do you think we should hear should we go back and hear the general comments?
So we're not sure if the general comments are for this item or for general NFP.
General
that kind of-
NFP, yeah, it was earlier on the agenda, so we would have missed it. So this might be a good time to play those,
Okay, sure.
just so we don't
All
miss
right.
any.
Yeah, it came into item number 1 box, so I am assuming it's for the general. But let me get this set up for you and I'll get her played.
My name is Richard Stewart. I reside in the city in the Southtown neighborhood. The Southtown neighborhood plan is made up by the neighborhood residents in the Southtown neighborhood, and we have requested in the neighborhood plan that the 9 parcels between Lake and Stockbridge be preserved in the natural feature protection map. We've been trying for 2 years to protect this undeveloped area. It's approximately 4 acres, partially wetland. It is our only natural green space, our last remaining natural watershed and natural wildlife habitat in the Southtown neighborhood. The predatory developer is doing everything they can to destroy this against the neighborhood wishes. The 77-car paved parking lot they want to put on this site is right across the street from a property that is for sale with over 300-car paved parking lot that's currently vacant and abandoned that used to house the state of Michigan offices. That is for sale. I don't understand why we're not getting more help in forcing the developer to relocate the project to the available properties that are available to them. It appears that one of the board members was added that actually is going to profit from the destruction of our natural features. So I would ask for your help to include the 9 parcels into the natural feature protection map to make it official with the city. I know there's been a lot of pushback on this property against us. So there's going to be apparently a tour with some of you, and I ask to attend that and be notified in advance so we can have members of the neighborhood meet with you during the tour and not have it done individually behind our backs. I appreciate any help you can provide. The city planner has my contact information, so you can give me notice in advance so we could arrange for neighborhood neighbors to attend to protect the natural feature. And we'd like you to help us get our Southtown neighborhood plan recognized by the city staff. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tina McClinton. I live at 310 Lake Street. I am from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I have lived in Southtown neighborhood, have owned my home for 36 years now. I have been trying to save this last green space between Lake and Stockbridge since December 18th of 2017. Have been to you, the NFP, have been to the EEC, have been to the news in 2018. This green space is Southtown neighborhood's only one left. The Southtown neighborhood plan has these 9 parcels, these 9 undeveloped parcels between Lake and Stockbridge as its only natural feature and needs your protection. Why will you just stand by and allow a developer who is on your board to destroy this green space to put a 77-car parking lot when there is a vacant lot right across the street on Stockbridge for sale? We have a Southtown neighborhood plan, but the city won't let us show it to them. I encouraged the Planning Commission and the NFP to save this piece of green space in the neighborhood. This is the last one, and it helps with flooding. When no one else does, this green space is 4 acres. It has its own God-made natural watershed, 60% wetlands, 40% is in a floodplain. It saves our home. It saves all the animals that live there. Foxes, owl. We have a falcon. We have deer. We have bees. I have lots of butterflies, lots of frogs because of the water. We now flood more than ever since 2017 when KVCC Growing Field came and took away 12 acres. Now we flood 2 to 3 times a year. Every year, storm drains fill up in the streets all around the neighborhood, back up the sewers, and that's what we get in our homes and in our basements. See, because of that little bitty piece of green space, even though it is in a poor neighborhood, poor people need green spaces too. Poor people need country too. You don't need to just save them in the richer neighborhoods. I mean, we love the animals. We love the country. This green space is all we have left to help save our homes. If this green space is destroyed by the city of Kalamazoo, then my home will be underwater. I've lived in my home for 36 years, never flooded till 2008. Then didn't flood again till 2017. Now it's every year. And like I said, it's not just water. We get the cities. Please help save this green space. I need it to survive, and so do the neighbors. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Okay, that's the end of the public comments.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah, I guess going back to the discussion about the Oakland Drive space, thanks for doing the groundwork, Paul, with the photographs. I think that helps make it clear what we're dealing with. And I do totally agree that I think if we can have the development, stabilize that slope and use curb and gutter, it could really actually improve that in terms of the slope and in terms of that critical root zone, and knowing that actually as proposed, it would put a little bit more impervious space in the footprint of that by changing the shape of it a little bit. And I'm wondering, still kind of stuck on the dumpster a little bit, and just wondering if those, we kind of talked about maybe they are 2 separate issues. They're in the same area. But just thinking about alternatives, either a variance to be able to put it in a corner or different section of the parking lot, and using that space as more of an asset for the residents or the kind of customers. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, or Tammy, maybe you could comment on just trying to visualize what kind of cut and fill would be required to get a flat footprint for that dumpster. Do you think it would be, is that visible in any of the plans, or?
Not really. I don't think we're doing a whole lot of cutting or filling in order to put that in there, because that slope setback is 10 feet. So we do have a 10 feet buffer before we start, actually more than that on that slope. So I don't think that the cut fill ratio is going to be much different than what is there currently, other than excavating in order to put the concrete pad in, but grade will pretty much be where it is now. And that's A, for economy's sake, but B, if we start messing with the elevation of the grade, then we're going to impact that slope. And the idea was to minimize that as little as possible.
Okay.
This is,
Go ahead, Bobby.
Hi, Bobby from Kalamazoo. I would go back to something we talked about once earlier. Would just be curious to know what the city would say regarding the 37 parking spaces. I have observed, and I bank at Consumers Credit Union, and I have observed that when I go there to other branches, there's very few in-building activity anymore that requires parking and getting out of one's car and going in. Now, there are some services that require that. So, but to me, the trend is much more drive-through and online banking and much less need for that number of parking places for the services that are required at a credit union. So if in fact the variance option is to allow for less parking because maybe it's not needed, then that might alleviate some of the problems of what to do in that northwest corner of the property.
This is Ashley, and I agree with you, Bobby, because you think about the footprint of the drive-through is taking up what could have been all these parking spots because you're making life so people use the drive-through. And Jamie, what do you think about that?
I can't speak to how all of our city staff would. They'd have to review that one and provide a recommendation. I guess I'd want to have the city planner and assistant city planners input on that one. I'm hearing that perhaps you guys want to separate out your request for relief, perhaps. Right now it reads the request for relief from the NFP slope protection and tree standards. You could easily split those out if you wanted to do that. And then we could definitely go back to the planning staff and talk about what less parking would look like on that site. But I think that would also be a big decision of the developer and the property owner. Can they lease and market those properties with less parking? So I think that, again, would have to be a decision of the developer to want to move forward with a different type of variance. And Tammy, I don't know if you feel like you have much of a sense of that with some of the other uses of the space. Okay.
I don't. I know that they want to make that as attractive as possible to a potential tenant. And beyond that, I really can't speak for them.
Yeah, if I understand, Tammy, there's more tenants in there than just the bank.
Yes,
Yeah,
there will be 2 additional tenants in the
Yeah.
bank building,
Okay.
in addition to the multi-tenant building that's on the Bacchus Foundation.
Okay.
This is Mitch. Tammy, is the consumers, just to kind of clarify, getting to some of the comments Bobby was making, is the consumers building there? I assume that's a walk-in building that a customer could use versus like administrative or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be a true branch.
So yeah, I think thinking about that and thinking about all the wireless and seeing what city staff might say about like 2 less parking spots, I'm looking at the site plan and there's a little kind of like vegetated swale that's just kind of to the south and the east of the dumpster. And I'm just wondering about the like 2 parking spots below that. If you took those away and just shifted that whole thing down, I don't know what would be how wide parking spots are, 10 feet or something like that. If then you could meet some of that setback a little better. I think, given Paul's photos, I'm definitely feeling a little more lenient on the critical root zone component of it, especially with the curb and gutter. But I still kind of have some open questions as to what sacrificing 2 parking spots and sliding that whole thing down to the south and the east, since it is a 10-foot buffer and parking spots are, close to 10 feet in width. If you were to subtract that, if you could kind of shift the whole thing.
Jamie, do you want to pull up that C001 again? So maybe we can see what Mitch was talking about, the area. Okay, Mitch, if you can kind of direct Jamie into the area that you were thinking.
So there's the dumpster, and then there's the 2-way, the 2 double arrows there going either way. Yep. And then there's that swale, and just wondering about like those 2 parking spaces due south of that. If you just eliminated those from the footprint, shifted that swale down, 10 feet, the width of a couple of parking spots. And if that could potentially collapse that whole footprint where the dumpster is and bring it, essentially, it might not be exact, but essentially shift the dumpster out of the buffer.
Right. And I see what the area you're talking about. Though, like the area you're referring to as a swale, that is a required landscape island for the city
Mhm.
within the parking lot. Eliminating a couple of spaces, if that were allowed, would be an alternative. However, and maybe we need to look at layout of the parking, but the problem is like I spoke of before, is access by a trash truck. So ideally, it's something that they can get to a straight shot in, and whether it's a turn like we have now to get out, but something easily maneuvered by a large vehicle like that. So anywhere that we need, or anywhere that we're thinking about putting it, we have to take those access items into consideration. Because it would be great if we could tuck it in some little nook and cranny, but unfortunately, something that's going to service a development such as this that could have restaurants in it, we obviously don't know at this point. We do need to take access into consideration.
Right. So I can see that those two-way traffic arrows that are just to the southeast of that dumpster. I'm not imagining that changing.
Right.
But if those 2 parking spots to the south of that vegetated island weren't there, keeping that same width, you could just shift everything the width of essentially a parking space.
Right. And what doing that does is it prevents the truck from getting to it head in, especially if pickup is during the daytime when that parking lot is being used by businesses. That's something to keep in mind. So it would have to be basically at a dead end of a drive somewhere, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to be ideal location or to be maneuverable for those trucks.
Right. Yeah, I guess I don't see how taking those away would change the width of that area.
It doesn't change the width, it just changed the access to a dumpster enclosure. Or you're saying take that entire drive and shift it to the south?
Nope, right where Jamie's arrow is, right there. Nope, sorry, go down. Those 2 parking spots right there, directly south of that vegetated island. If those just weren't there, and then the vegetated island takes the place of those 2 spots, keeping that same width for access to the dumpster, everything would essentially just slide to the south and the east a little bit, and that would provide some more relief from that slope.
Okay, so you're saying relocate that access drive, that the double arrows, the 2-way arrow.
Nope, not saying that. I'm simply saying if you took 2 of those parking spots away, everything would shift down. It would be the same location. The dumpster would just be slightly more to the south and the east off that slope.
Okay, well, I'd have to put pen to paper and see if that all lays out where that would work.
I have a quick suggestion too. Take that old silver maple down and put the dumpster right on top of it. So,
And that would address it somewhat. Access would be a little trickier. But again, we wouldn't be able to fit that whole dumpster enclosure outside of that slope setback.
yeah, I'm sorry. I used to dump the dumpsters at Western Michigan University when I punched the clock, and I mean, I could get in some places you wouldn't believe with the stuff. So, but that was me. When I was sober, I couldn't do it. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think what Paul was kind of saying is we have we have this silver maple here, but maybe there's some more space before this line here, right, Tammy, is
That's the setback.
Whereas this feels like it's, way out, more so outside of or into the setback versus maybe this area has some
Right.
more
A smaller
space to
portion.
play. And perhaps there would have to be you may still sacrifice some parking here if you moved this down and made there's some curve right there. So,
Right.
and I'm wondering if, so the way the process goes is the applicant can, they're getting a recommendation from this board. They can make the decision if they get an affirmative or negative recommendation to still perhaps go to the ZBA and have the ZBA hear the variance and make a decision, because the decision does lie with the zoning board of appeals. The zoning board of appeals will rely heavily on this board's recommendations, and I'm sure most applicants are looking for something a positive recommendation moving forward. So I don't know what the board wants to do now, if you have some remaining questions or comments, or if you feel like you want to think about this motion separately, so that the applicant could maybe take this forward and decide if they need to restructure anything before going to the ZBA, or restructure the request. It sounds like perhaps a variance would be required no matter what, whether that's a slope encroachment or if it's a parking parking variance, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I move that we recommend to the zoning board of appeals that the relief from the tree standards portion for the parking lot at 3110 Oakland Drive be granted. And okay, that's my motion.
Support that motion.
Okay. All in favor of granting relief or variance from the critical root zone tree protection standard? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I apologize, Mitch. We're going to do a roll call vote for these.
Okay.
I almost interrupted you.
Yeah.
Make that mistake every time too.
Okay, good.
And so I heard that there was a motion by Director McNellis with support by Director Colwick. Getting these down. Chair Leto, should I do a roll call vote?
Sure.
Colwick.
Aye. Favor, yes.
Fuller.
Aye.
Lasser.
I support that motion.
Leto.
Aye.
McNellis.
Aye.
Thank you.
And
And then I guess, go ahead, Paul.
yeah, I guess right behind that, Tammy, I would like Bosch to look at the dumpster situation again. And, we're not, anyway, I think there are some alternatives there that would not require so much relief in that slope area. You've heard our suggestions back and forth, but please look at it again.
Yep, we will do so. And is that with the understanding that there is no opposition to that 42-inch maple being removed if need be? And granted, I know that there is a tree replacement requirement that would go along with that. And we're right now, what we're essentially doing is protecting a non-native tree anyways.
Yeah.
So
It's a native tree. It just seems like it's probably on its last legs.
And it's just not a good tree to plant in cities. They split and fall apart.
Silver maples. Yeah, there's, God bless them. No. I think
it could be replaced with a tree maybe that's suitable for the size of the lot, and maybe a red bud or something.
And that would, I feel like under the diseased or dying category would probably not require a variance necessarily. It could be something that you propose during site plan, and this board would if you propose to remove it, this board would help you. And if you proposed a replacement, then this board would have the ability to like approve that as part of all of site plan and make sure that's, but I don't think you'd need a variance for that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I-
there are some fresh buds on that tree, but I'm telling you, that old guy, I don't think even knows he's alive. He's bad. He's bad.
Yeah, and I kind of echo Paul's comments. I think I'm feeling better about the tree critical root zone piece, and then just considering kind of from city ordinance perspective, taking away 2 of those spots and shifting it to the south, exploring other possible locations for the dumpster within the site plan, and also possibly leveraging that natural feature boundary there as more of a pedestrian asset instead of sort of an impediment, because that might be where your sight lines are nicest for residents and for visitors and stuff. So those are kind of my last thoughts.
Chair Leto, do you think we should go ahead and is the board deciding to not take up a motion? They're not willing to entertain a motion for the setback, or do you the slope setback, or do you want to ask for a motion and have people vote yes or no?
I guess it sounds like everyone's wanting to see the alternatives explored a little more directly, both with city staff and just with sort of planning drawing components. So whether we vote to sort of come back to that, I don't know what makes the most sense, but it seems like I'm seeing nods, and that's kind of where everybody's going.
So that item is tabled until a future recommendation comes forward. I can, Tammy, if you and I want to jump on the phone yet this week, because I know we have to let kind of ZBA know this week. So maybe you and Pete Eldridge and I, since he manages that board, maybe we should try to get on a call tomorrow with your team or in the next day or two.
Okay.
And talk about what the best way to go forward with that would be.
Let's do that then. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that takes us, unless there's anything I'm missing on the new business on the Oakland Drive item, I think that takes us to old business. Presentation of the proposed amendments to the NFP overlay map and text. Is that Nolan?
Yeah, this is Jamie. So we did hear the public comments. So that was good for the board to hear those that seem to relate to this item in particular. And yes, Nolan and I have been, I know Nolan in particular has been putting a lot of time into taking a look at the map, thinking about some of the comments that we heard at the joint meeting with the Planning Commission, but really thinking about some of the observations that the mapping committee made maybe at one of our last meetings. And so I think he has a really great recommendation to move forward. I'm going to let him talk about the slight modifications that he made to the map. And then I'm going to talk about, I'm going to let you guys kind of open up and reflect on any comments or feedback that you got from the Planning Commission. And then I'll go over what I see as our public rollout and next steps over the next 2 to 3 months to bring this back to the Planning Commission. So Nolan, if you want to bring up, I'm not sure if I have the ability to give you screen sharing, but maybe Amanda or Don could help us with that.
It looks like I can. I mean, the share screen button is there, so I'll just try it and see what happens. I guess before I share it, yeah, I'll just say I've been working on the map a lot, primarily from one of the last meetings of the map committee. Aaron had pointed out, or we had noticed a example over the slope layer didn't quite make sense. Either it was an artifact from the layer, or maybe it was something else. And so that's kind of what triggered my brain. It was this example right here. Can everyone see my screen? Aaron, maybe you remember this from the last meeting. This so the contours aren't, I didn't create those. Those were provided. That's a layer from the city. And the yellow is the slope layer that I had. And the slope layer that I had, the one caveat I had with it was I wasn't sure what year the DEM was from, or if it was, derived from a paper map. So that was something I was exploring, but this kind of made me think, okay, what's happening? This layer was accurate in some places, but not accurate in others, which made me think the layer was older. So I actually had some calls with folks from the USDA and the USGS, and they were like, well, maybe you should try this DEM. I hadn't been able to find it, but I did. And I tried the analysis again. And this green layer is what came out of that. And so in many ways, sort of a blessing of going through this process again was that I was able to update that layer to be more accurate in terms of mapping. So there's this example. So what this has enabled was, we could capture, I don't want to say capture, but these parcels could be added, so to speak, to keep the integrity of the slope. And another good example is Woods Lake, which is kind of a pertinent example. But what didn't make sense to me initially was this. The older DEM didn't match what I saw in the imagery. And I thought, it matched here, but it wasn't matching here. Turn these off now. And you can see I want the updated layer. What's happening is I was able to pick up more accurately. It's the same resolution, it's the same pixel size, but there should be less artifacts and more accurate data there.
That's great. That looks really on point.
So that made me feel good. I worried about this for a long time. Drove me, for about a month or 4 or 5 weeks, I worked on this and tried every iteration to make sure I was, I want it to be defensible. I think it is. None of the other layers changed. Hydrology, I used the same, it hasn't changed. And what came out of this, the March layer draft, NFP phase 2 plus phase 1, because we're keeping phase 1 parcels in the mix. The total, I think, parcel number, not parcel number, parcel identification numbers. There are some condominiums that have one parcel shape, but have, they could have 80 pins inside of it. So if that makes sense. But yeah, I think with the updated slope layer, I went through parcel by parcel manually, taking some parcels out that didn't make sense anymore. So here, the old slope layer, it wasn't making sense with the contours. So this could have been artifacts through analysis. Those were able to be taken out, a few others. But I added, I think, where the total number is around 1900, which sounds a lot, but the parcel identification numbers, there's like 25,000 in the city. So effectively, having gone through this whole process again, where we're at is sort of, I think, about as robust as it can be. I mean, the layer could be nitpicked, I think, until the end of time for accuracy and everything else. But some of the key takeaways, I think, especially having worked with it just for so much time now, is just the unique layout of the city's natural features. You have, the floodplain, and we've picked up the parcels along, adjacent to water. I think we can say now that both the mapping committee and the other committee working on the written standards have done the due diligence of looking at the map over and over again and identifying slopes and picking up key preserves that are very important to people. So I feel comfortable with where it's at now. And so if you have any questions for me, hopefully everybody got the updated map book. I shared it with everyone earlier today via Google Drive. So that's for you as a reference. You can compare it to the one from March. It goes neighborhood by neighborhood, just like this.
Nolan, would that map book or your layers there get too busy if we had some street names?
It should have. I thought I had labeled some street names. If I didn't, I could maybe change that. It wouldn't take very long to upload.
Okay, because
just street names.
I went through several of the several of the, got like 20 some neighborhoods. That's interesting. I didn't know Kalamazoo had that many, but yeah.
Yes, I mean
I had a hard time pinpointing exactly.
Yeah.
Even just the major streets would be good.
I can send another version of it out to you guys with that more like contextual stuff in there. I thought it had been included, but I also wanted to send it to you before the meeting tonight. So any other questions? I keep looking at the map, thinking about ways I could probably make it better. So
You'll never be done.
No map was ever perfect.
Yeah.
Nolan, do you mind stopping screen share for a moment?
Oh,
Sorry, I just know with the zooming in and out, that's a lot on the screen for
Sorry.
watching. No problem. That's great.
Nolan, you've done a great job. Go get a beer. Take it easy on yourself.
The professional world scares me. It's all full of ambiguity and non-binary answers, really. I don't know how you guys do it every day, but yeah, I'm not kidding. I think the past 6 weeks has just been like combing through it, and I think it's probably as close to. And yeah, the number of meetings Jamie and I have had talking about it.
So maybe that's a good time to open it up. Nolan, thank you very much for, I think, addressing that.
Thank you, Nolan.
Yeah, that some of the little discrepancies that the committee saw. And then I know that Nolan spent a lot of time going through and then just making some slight adjustments following the criteria that the original committee applied to just make sure those were consistent with that updated layer. And so I think, again, that's a really outstanding map right now. What I've committed to is staff doing a little bit of ground truthing, just giving this the last look at some of these areas that may have been picked up by this new slope layer. And so that helps us get something ready by next week. So maybe now's a good time. Why don't I tell you about kind of what we see happening over the next few months, and then we'll flip back to the board and maybe have a little bit of discussion about whether the proposal that went and the presentation and the recommendations that were rolled out last month in the joint meeting with the Plan Commission still make a lot of sense for what we want to roll out to the public for sort of the first set of public comment. So let me get this slide up here. So you should be able to see my screen here. The work that Nolan's been doing over the last month is really getting us to this May 3rd date next week. So starting next week, we'd love to be able to put a draft map and the draft amendments up on imaginekalamazoo.com. We'd have those at City Hall. Those would really be ready for public release so that we can get sort of the first public opinion, get the information out to the neighborhoods. I like how he has it broken out by neighborhoods so folks can really zoom in and look at their area. This would be out for the month of May so that at your May 25th meeting, you could take public comments. The city staff will have compiled public comments, concerns, questions from the public. We can do a presentation again at that meeting and use that NFP meeting for, again, a sort of reintroduction of this project. And then have you guys vote to recommend this to the Planning Commission. So what that would do would help us trigger as staff that we can put notice letters out to the landowners and adjacent landowners so they know this is coming. You know, we have to have a map that's approved to then be able to know exactly who to send that notice to. At the June 3rd meeting, I know we had talked about bringing this back for a public hearing to the Planning Commission by June, but we really wanted to give them one more presentation. They kind of like to see and talk about something 3 times before it comes to a official public hearing. And so June would allow us to do that. We could give, again, a presentation on this exact map and the exact set of amendments to the text. And that would especially benefit the Planning Commission because they do have a few new members. So I'd really love to be able to have that interaction with them again and take their comments again. Right after that, or right around that same time, you know, again, those notice letters can be mailed. We don't want to do it too far ahead of the public hearing, but again, we heard from the Planning Commission that making sure we're really on top of public notice is important. So, you know, somewhere right in that first week of June, we'd send those notice letters. June would also be a time for staff to have a virtual town hall or some sort of informational session so people could get information about what the overlay district entails. Staff is committed to having some office hours and offering some zoning reviews. So if property owners have concerns, staff will take a look at, you know, their specific property. It's great to have a project tied to that too, something that they want to be able to do or they're planning on doing. And we can let them know how and if that the zoning rules would impact that project. Then again, I think June 22nd would be the next NFP review meeting, and we'd allow and take more public comment because now we have letters out to the actual property owners being added to the district, and it would be a good opportunity to just, you know, get some feedback, understand what kind of, if there's things that shouldn't be included in that overlay district, any you know, data errors, things that we need to really look at. We'd be taking those on June 22nd. It is much harder at this time to add items into an overlay district because we hadn't put them on notice, and that's required under statute. So we can definitely be taking things away from the district, but adding would be difficult. So that's really where we want to try to get the word out in May, that if people have strong recommendations, they need to get those into us in the month of May. July 1st then is the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting. So that would be a public hearing. I guess maybe we do want to adjust this notice date back so that we're making sure we're getting it out a full 4 weeks in advance. But at any rate, you know, sometime after May 25th, it seems like a good time that we can get that letter out and let people know that July 1 will be the public hearing for the Planning Commission meeting. So that gives you a sense of kind of what the next 2 months would look like. I wanted to open it up after having heard from the Planning Commission and had the joint meeting in March. Were there any pieces of information, thoughts or comments that you've processed through that would you know, make us want to look back at any of the amendments and the way that they were written? I guess I'll just open that up to the group right now. Things maybe that staff should be aware of if we're thinking about this timeline. I'm hoping we're being responsive enough to get that notice letter out as much as possible. And again, trying to get to neighborhoods and different groups to give them information ahead of that notice letter as much as possible.
I think the text amendments overall just were simplifications. So I think, and it seemed like most of the issues people had was not understanding the language and then the map. So yeah, I'm happy to move on.
Yeah, I agree. It seemed like the biggest hang up was the tree standard. And it seems like everyone kind of agreed that it was going to be really hard to enforce that, and that would capture way too much just real estate of the city, and that NFP might not be the best avenue to address that. And it seemed like that was where people were getting kind of a little bit of an alarmist response to being in the NFP area. And to that end, I was wondering, Jamie, about the letter. Is there certain language? So when a letter goes out to somebody, says your parcels in the NFP, commercial, residential, whatever, is there sort of standard language that has to be in there for city requirements? It seemed like one of the things that she was kind of talking about, like the communication issue of it. And I think it's obviously could be an obstacle for someone trying to do a development, but we're also hearing from the community that they want the natural features protected. And I think we've talked a lot about trying to also communicate that it should be flattering, or it could be kind of an asset to be in the NFP, and that it is really cool that we are taking those next steps to kind of protect. You have one of the last remaining like natural areas in the development of the city. Yes, it does mean some things, but I just feel like those should both be there. And I think if it's just feels like a regulatory letter, then I imagine I might react similarly if I was just a Jane or Joe Schmo.
This is Jamie. So Mitch, your question was, are there certain statutory requirements on how that letter reads? And I would say, no, I think we have a lot of freedom in what that letter says. Sure, there's some boxes that need to be ticked and some information we have to provide through that letter, but that's typically, very straightforward information about when the public hearing is going to be held, how to access it, et cetera. So otherwise, I think, yes, we have a lot of flexibility, and that might be a really nice thing to maybe use one of our committees to help review and make sure that if there are any sort of natural resource kind of benefits language, things that should be put into there, I'd love to get the committee's feedback on, how we make sure we're communicating that. So I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help with that if it comes up.
Any other takeaways? I know that Director Sylvester is not here, but he had mentioned in the past, how does the NFP overlay district compare to or contrast with something like a historic district? And I did hear that come up as well in the joint meeting with Planning Commission. So I think that was really useful to hear, and something that staff really needs to think about. And perhaps something that we could use in some of our communications as well. What is it? How do those sorts of things compare? I think that overall there will probably be fewer similarities, but I think it's really good to maybe talk in those terms because people are used to that kind of a district, more so maybe than a natural district, more of a historic district.
Special designation. Something.
Well, yeah, if there are no last comments on this, does that schedule look like something workable, gives folks an opportunity to make a stop at the NFP meetings for the next couple of months?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie, for that timeline and for being so organized. So.
Yeah, if there's some like micro adjustments that you're going to make to a couple of dates, and if you could send that to us in an email, and just, obviously the NFP meetings would be required for us to come to, but then if the Planning Commission meetings would just be sort of like optional or encouraged, or sort of those sorts of details. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think that the Planning Commission probably would like to be able to have more feedback from the NFP review board. So maybe we can get it set up to somehow have you guys as panelists, or I don't know, in in-person meetings, you'd just be in the room and be able to make a comment perhaps, but this would be a little bit harder with virtual, but I'll check around as to kind of how that might work, or if we should do a joint presentation or something like that. So I will work on that as well and let you guys know about what meetings that you should attend. Other than that, I don't know, Nolan, do you have any last comments or questions or things that you wanted feedback from the group?
I don't think so. I will get you all the map book. I'll send it again. I'll share it again with street names, so that you can orient yourselves a little bit easier. I thought it showed up, but it didn't. And then I don't think so. If any of you notice anything that maybe you find suspect or you feel strongly may not need to be in, it is a lot easier to take it out than add it back in. But yeah, just any of those notes this week, because I know it's going to be kind of down to the wire to get it to the public in a map form for early next week. But yeah, I'll send that out tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Nolan. So this is Jamie. Thank you, Nolan. I think that he made a great point. I wanted to thank Nolan for working so closely with our IT and GIS folks. He's been working with staff, keeping them updated. So there will be a little bit of, IT, GIS work that has to happen. And so staff have said they're going to try to get it online. May 3rd is our target date. If it takes an extra day or two, we'll definitely get an email out to this board, to our bigger NFP email list, and let people see that as soon as possible. So that's our target date, and we're going to try to shoot for that as much as possible, barring any technical difficulties. So I think we'll be really close to that date.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Nope, go for it.
Oh, yeah. I just got to tell everybody, I feel real comfortable with the map so far. I mean, we went through so many, not iterations, but the big thing that we hinged the decisions on, or what's included and what's not, or what's going to be excluded, is that we can justify it through all of the different, not all the different, but through, several criteria that we look at. So yeah, I think it's going to be now a matter of somebody convinces us that they should be in there, and we just take them out. But thanks, Nolan, you did a great job. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Nolan.
Yeah, very much appreciated. Good work.
Right. Any other board comments?
I also, Mitch, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a comment. With some of our board training and best practices that we're adopting, I did want to let everyone know that board announcements, if you have anything under this category, if it's training that you recently attended or any information you think would be useful for the board, this is a really great time to share that. I'll try to do the same thing. If staff have attended trainings or have more information, this might be a nice agenda item to share those sorts of things as we move forward. So I'll try to remind everybody of that.
Just in terms of general resources, Jamie, or was there something like an example you had of that in terms of trainings or?
I think that it's a broad category, so whatever people think. I know a couple of meetings ago, I think it was Director Fuller brought to our attention some literature and some articles that had come out about the value and benefit of nature. And so I think that was a really nice piece of information to pass along. But yeah, either topical to what this board looks at, or even as far as board operations and things like that too.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna look up something. Aaron, this is Paul McNellis. Sorry, it's the only time I said that. I have a YouTube actual link that I would like y'all to see. It's about some research in England of why people move to the suburb and why people move back to the city and back and forth. And it really hit home to me of why we're doing this. So anyway, I will send that around to everybody and you can look at that. Thanks for that article you sent out, Aaron. I appreciated that. I went through it. It was great.
I think some of the sentiments from that article, those couple of articles Aaron sent around, could play into some of the language that we use for the like notification letters of just like, you know, general well-being is increased and all these health metrics are increased, being the more trees you have in your neighborhood or the closer you are to natural areas and natural spaces and those sorts of things could help drive home that idea a little bit. All right, any other board comments or announcements?
I wanted to announce that probably taken up at our July NFP review board meeting that we need to hold an annual meeting and think about election of officers. So Mitch has been serving as president for a while. We have Director Colwick is our assistant or our vice chair. And so we need to talk about, you know, making that shift and what leadership we have. I think that also might be a really good time, speaking of training, our city attorney has put together a really nice presentation, kind of a board training piece on Robert's Rules of Order for boards. And so I thought if that's of interest, I guess a lot of different boards have been getting that presentation and finding it really valuable. So perhaps I can put together maybe a training or two things that this board might be interested in doing. We can also talk about at that time, maybe setting up an annual time of year to hold more of a board retreat so that in place of maybe one of these meetings, if we don't have agenda items, we could use that in a different way to think about. I know you guys have really been thinking a lot about the ordinance and the map. And so maybe it's like in 12 months from now, we do bylaws and, you know, other things. Maybe it's again, another review of the materials that you have been looking at. So we might need a little bit of space, but I do think that July might be a good time for our annual meeting. Because again, that's about a year, kind of on that year schedule. And I think this board first convened in June or July of 2 years ago. So keep an eye out for that information. I'll get that out to you guys.
Yeah, I think my term, this is Paul. I think my term's coming up pretty quick here. If I was looking at dates a few weeks ago and went, holy shit. I mean, holy cow. I'm getting short.
So that's correct. We have staggered terms for the existing board. They are, I'll have to look back. I think they're 3-year terms that you're serving, but some of you have been put on a 1 year and a 2-year staggered term to begin with. And there is the option to renew for another 3-year term to be reappointed. So we will look at that as well, Paul, though. That's a great point. I'll look at whose terms are going to be up and then reach out to those folks to see if they're interested in serving another term.
How about the number of board members we have? I mean, this is the closest we've ever come to not like having a quorum. So it doesn't seem like it's a really big issue, but I wasn't sure if we kind of hit our target number or if there was a lack of applicants when it all started or.
As part of the ordinance language, the board is a 7-member board. So you're fully staffed up or you've got all your seats taken.
Oh.
And that ordinance also does describe kind of what areas of expertise each board member is supposed to be representing.
Yeah, maybe we could visit a natural feature for an annual meeting. Like a real one that you could see.
Yeah, and I think that as part of a retreat, doing tours is often something that we used to do back way back when the world was a different place. And so I think we could definitely consider that in the future. I think that's a really valuable comment.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, everybody's been doing an awesome job with some bonus tasks. Any other announcements? Cool. If there's no more announcements or comments, I think that brings us to the end of our meeting, and happy to adjourn. Thanks for coming, everybody. Enjoy this 85-degree day.
See ya.
Bye.